Hector Herrera has arrived, but has he been the be-all, end-all answer to the Houston Dynamo's problems? Well, we're gonna cut into that thread a little bit here. We got plenty to dive into. Obviously, been a little while since we last checked in here on Inside the Hexagon and Houston Dynamo podcast um, on thestriker.com for all your soccer news here pertaining to Texas. You already know we got this area covered. Now we got coverage in California, out in Georgia as well. So there you go. NWSL too. So there's plenty to dive into. I'm one of your hosts, Victor Aiza, and I'm joined as I am always joined by Laura Gomez. And Laura, it's been, like we said, a couple of games. It's a hectic summer. How are you feeling the heat or bringing the heat these days? I guess that's the same thing.
I'm good. Happy to see you once again. And like you mentioned, we've been, doing different projects here and there. And sometimes, the podcast is the one that suffers. But one of our main goals is to bring you weekly information, which we're getting better at. We're getting better at. I think that consistency is key. And we're getting better at doing that. But some things have been, going on, like you mentioned, Hector Herrera. There's been a lot of women's soccer, a lot of different leagues, tournaments and things going on. So there's a lot in that end. But let's break it down. Let's take care of business and talk about what we need to talk about.
Hot and heavy summer. Last time we checked in, we actually had an interview. Both of us with Hector Herrera. We talked about some of his objectives here with Houston, trying to get him to know a little better. There was some good tidbits there if you're a Dynamo fan, particularly because he's a former Pachuca player. We talked a little bit about that Pachuca Dynamo rivalry. But the perfect start, right? Getting off to a winning start in Copa Tejas, not exactly that way. There was a 2-2 draw with FC Dallas in the sold-out debut, a 3-1 loss to Austin, and then a good win, his first MLS start for Herrera, big win on the road for Houston, 2-1 at San Jose, and then this last game, Herrera making his first start at PNC Stadium, a 2-1 loss to Minnesota United. So where does that leave Houston at the moment?
Not good.
No, not good. They can, before the international break, right? It was right there on the edge of the Western Conference standings of the playoff spots, the top 7. And since the international break, it's been wins have been hard to come by. The team is in 11th place, which is kind of where it was hovering last year, if we remember, before it ended up in dead last. Obviously, there's more teams this year. It's a 14-team Western Conference now. Yeah. It was supposed to be new energy, new everything, right? But, some things are similar. We'll dive into those. But first, do you want to let's dive into the start of HH. What's been the good, what's been the bad, and what we can kind of take out of this?
I mean, when we talked to him last time that we had the podcast, I mean, he really had, the energy. Prior to that, we had talked about it, that we're like, well, he seems kind of like, I'm kind of here, but I'm not fully here. But I think he's transitioned to really feel like he's here. And I think he's still doing that. But once we were able to talk to him, you kind of got that vibe that he really wants to make something of being part of the Houston Dynamo and not just cash in, from what I was able to kind of perceive from that interview. He was excited about, the local rivalries that we had. Unfortunately, they didn't go in favor of I would say, the Houston Dynamo. But I think that just him, debuting against Dallas was something that was meaningful.
Yeah, what did you think of that game? Let's dive into that one, because that was the first sellout in a long time for the team, right? PNC Stadium, a big part was just to get see the first minutes of HH. This latest home match against Minnesota, just 2 weeks removed. I mean, it's back to 15,000 people a game. And I mean, and we'll see how the attendance kind of goes. But I think a big point of bringing in a Mexican national team star was the hope that there would be more consistent sellouts, at least a PNC Stadium closer to full capacity. And it seems like maybe that was a one and done deal. We haven't gotten your thoughts, I don't think, on his debut. What did you think of that night at PNC? And do you think he will have a lasting effect, or do you think we've already seen pretty much the best that's gonna happen as far as attendance?
I mean, I think that there's a combination. Obviously, we know that it's a derby game, and usually derby games are better than other games just in attendance and because what it means, no matter how good or how bad the teams are doing currently on the standings. I think that I don't think it's a one-time deal, but I think that people are going to need to see more wins for them to really want to say I need to go, because as we know, the Achachi name is huge. But it's still, I don't want to use the word lower than perhaps other bigger stars that would say, I'm just going to go see him and it's going to fill up, So there has to also be a complementary reason of why people that don't know the Selección Mexicana or don't know about Mexican football, don't know about the teams that he's been in
and he's not a goal
in Europe. Yeah, so. Exactly. So I think there has to be a combination of certain things. And like I said, yes, I think it's historic. I think it's changing a lot of the things that the team had never done before. So it's doing a lot of things that are positive, but I still stand by what I said, that I don't think it's going to be like a remedy for everything that the team is lacking. I think it's a step forward. I think that it's a good signage. I think that it's going to do the team good in the long run, but there's still certain parts and aspects of the team that need to be worked on for Achacha to fully have all the potential and all the tools that he needs to actually make this team rememberable, like impacting other teams that, that they go play and say, oh, wow, the Dynamo is doing amazing. And then they have this amazing player, because the team has to do well to also highlight what he's doing. I don't think he's gonna be able to carry the whole team on his back.
I agree. I share the same sentiment. And I think we've already started to see some of those things in the loss to Austin, in the loss to Minnesota. The win against San Jose, I think, was huge because it put the team at that moment 2 points. It was a stepping stone for them to come home and get another victory and get back into the playoff picture, despite the winless run they were just on, which was four straight winless. And I think that's why this Minnesota loss, this most recent loss, it's disappointing because it was kind of, all right. It was a wonderful moment against FC Dallas because they rescued a draw.
Yeah, it was a really good game. It was like tense.
Yeah, FC Dallas was close to winning that. I think if maybe more experience, Jesus Ferreira would have clinched that one, and FC Dallas could have left with a 3-1 victory. And in the end, you lose the Texas Derby, but you rescue something. You don't let them win on your own turf, right? The one at Austin, I mean, they're just on another level right now, and they're distance apart. There is a gap between these two teams. Houston's still, year one under Nagamura, year one under Onstad as GM, full year under Tetsugo as the owner. But I think farther than that, there's still some roster turnover that we've spoken about. It's clearly evident. Yes. It's clearly evident that needs to happen because it's the way that the team is. It's not winning. It's not generating the results it needs to. It's a tough spot, right? Because I think people want to be hopeful. People want to believe in Pat Onstad as the GM. They've seen Tetsugo open up the checkbook on and off the field to try to make this club more relevant. It's obviously not going to get fixed right away, right? Yeah. I think, there needs to be more coal to the fire. I do think from a soccer perspective, those, we all who know the game know that there's more that probably could be done. That I will say maybe that's with not lacking the information, right? That the club has. Maybe it is more difficult to turn some of these things around. But there are some topics, right? For example, the topic of the head coach. Was Nagamura the right hire at the time? I think there was doubts amongst the fans, and it's rightfully so, those doubts are coming up.
Hmm.
Um, we just mentioned the roster movement and how that needed to be addressed. It wasn't, and don't be surprised. The summer schedule, which takes its toll every year. What do you think it's the biggest issue right now at the club that it faces? Maybe the easiest fix, if that's. I know that's a little bit of a loaded question, but
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it's like we've talked about before. I just think that it's been kind of like the perfect storm for things not to go right. I mean, even with the win that they had at San Jose, I mean, look how San Jose is at. I mean, they're like, what are they below, I think, or
yeah,
one
they're
above or
not
two
good.
points above?
They're not a
Exactly.
good
So
team.
it's
It was a
exactly.
great win because you got 3 points, but
Well, yeah,
it's not
exactly.
a good
And
team.
that's amazing and good. But when you really look at it, yeah, you won, but you only beat a team that's, if not the same, in the same kind of
It's a
boat
team
that
you
you
should be
are.
beating if you are a decent team.
Exactly. Yeah. So San Jose is in what I'm looking right now in 13th place. So yeah, it's a team that's below you. So for me, it's kind of like expected. It doesn't matter if they're playing away or not, which historically they haven't done too well playing away. But that to me is kind of like, okay, so you beat a team that's obviously worse than you. Congrats. Let's move on.
Yeah, no,
So
and if we put stuff into perspective, look who's around them in the Western Conference table, right below them, Colorado, who they barely rescued a tie with at PNC, right? Vancouver is just above them, who they barely beat at PNC. RSL is a little higher on the table, but when we talk about that, have
mhm.
at that point had been the first game of the season. They were missing some players, some key players, and for you to not to get 3 points, a big topic here is a 4-4-4 home record to this point. They have 4 losses at home.
Yeah.
They're not going to get to the playoffs that way.
And like, I mean, it's not, again, it's not being negative in the sense of, oh, the same old Dynamo, they're, the same old team. But if we're seeing results like this, it kind of brings you deja vu. And we've seen this. Like, again, for me, it's also with the head coach, it's kind of deja vu with the coach
Oh,
prior. So, I mean, it's like, for me, it's kind of like you want different results. You want impactful, amazing, new, refreshing results. Yet a lot of the steps that are being done, it's kind of like the same thing. So how are you expecting a different result if you're still doing some of the same patterns you did seasons before? And like I said, yes, there's been a lot of, like you mentioned, opening up the wallet that wasn't done before. The culture, they're trying to make it better. There's different things that are being done also to the stadium that's being done to really make it really fun for the fans and for people to want to go often. But some of the things still feel the same. And
right.
when I say some of the things, including the roster, it's like, yeah, we want different results and we're doing this and we're doing that, but yet you still have the same kind of core. I mean, we've mentioned this before. There's players that I feel that should have been gone this season and they're still there.
Yeah, and there's going to
So
be quite a few that have the option to leave. Um, but that doesn't mean that automatically they will leave. I mean, and it's not to single anybody out, right? But I'm just saying, like, at least there's I can get you the number exactly, but there's going to be a lot of players coming out of contract. There is the opportunity this
mhm,
next offseason to truly evolve the roster. But yeah, you're right. It's deja vu, right? Because we had year one of Tab Ramos, and then it's
exactly.
like, well, this isn't Tab Ramos' team. This is still Wilmer Cabrera's roster, right?
Yep.
When Tab gets his team, and then season two, that's gonna be different, right? And then we saw season
Same
two,
thing.
and it was and in a sense there were many of the similar players, right, and many of similar issues as well. Maybe this year Darwin Quintero is happy, but there's been the issue with Fafa Pico, right? There's we don't know what's going on exactly with Sebastian Ferreira, right? I mean, this was a big money transfer that's not seen minutes in the past couple of games. There are very striking similarities.
Hmm.
And we've talked about the positives, right? Steve Clark in
Yeah.
goal, being a little, more solid than Marco Maric before him. Um, it's always a combination of things. I think, um, you know, what can this team do? I think when people ask, um, I think a lot of them too have accepted that maybe it's just, this team just isn't getting to the playoffs this year just because of the schedule that's left.
Mhm.
Um, I will say though, this is what you got. At least for the rest of the season, this is the hand you're being dealt. This is what you're playing with. There's no unless they get one big name player, one key midfielder, I think, um, in this transfer window, which I think is only open for one more week, and it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. This, like you said, this is essentially your core. There's no big game changer coming in, um, and the big question is, can this team make the playoffs? I think only if they go on a bit of a streak, if they can string some results together, and that's maybe not that possible.
No, and I agree with you too. And it's something that I also said from the beginning. We said from the
Not
beginning.
impossible, but
No, yeah, but this is my kind of view. Yes, a lot of players, their contracts will be done, by the end of the season, and they won't be signed again, or blah blah blah. But a lot of them, an example, and it's not to single out, but Memo Rodriguez, I think he should leave for his own career's sake. Um, and however you decide to
should have
play,
left last year.
exactly. So however you want to, deal your career and do this and do that, at the end of the day, whenever another team is looking at you, sometimes and most of the times, yeah, they're going to look at what happened with the entire team. But if they're going to, hire you, they're going to look at your stats. They're going to look at what you did. What have you done to contribute? So if the Dynamo loses every game from, the next one on to forever for this season, but that player is still doing what they need to do, they're going to have good odds at being
Yeah,
hired and not
that's
just
why.
stand still and stale, which I
Right.
feel is a word, stale. A lot of players are stale at this moment.
Yeah, that's why some people may be saying, "Oh, there's been things said about Fafa Pico in the past couple of weeks, right? Because of that situation of maybe, um, I think the assumption is he doesn't want to be as defensive, right? Which, by the
Mhm.
way, Albert Elise was the same way, same mentality, and look where he's at, right? But yeah, like I mean, I agree
But
because
we
you're right.
can't compare them both.
If
We can't
no, no, no,
compare.
no, no, but I no, but you can't compare the mentality, right? Because I think you're
Yeah,
right. What you just mentioned. If you're a Papa Pico, right, you're nearing the end of your career. Yeah, you're right. You're trying to win. You're trying to get a couple last trophies. You're going to be judged, like you said, by your statistics. What you did in spite of the situation, because I think you're right. I
exactly.
think anybody that knows the sport will look at the situation and say, all right, well, but what did you generate? And I think you're right. I think maybe there aren't as many players like that. I do think there are a lot of players that are complacent, that have just accepted, yeah, I'm fine here. This is this
Yeah,
is
it is
this
what it
is
is.
okay. Yeah. And but let me mention to you some of the players, right, that'll be out of, or at least that we sort of know will be out of contract. Quintero, who is obviously on a 1 year deal. Um, Zarek Valentin, Tyler Patcher, Fafa Pico, who we mentioned, Adam Lundqvist, who I think is hasn't taken that next step as a starting left back. Daniel Steros, who was brought in on a 1 year deal from the LA Galaxy. Darwin Seren, Seca, Griffin Dorsey, Marcelo Palomino, Thiago, but that's obviously a loan deal from Brazil.
Mhm.
Sam Junker, and uh, and that's what you got as far as this year. Those are some guys that could be heading off, parting
I mean,
ways.
that's like
But
half of the team.
yeah, and to be fair, we've seen that type of roster turnover before, and it hasn't necessarily generated the same result. I go again, and you know what? If you want, let's look at the schedule for this one. I think they got to get on a run. They got at Philadelphia next, which is going to be a tough
Mm.
game. Then in the month of August, at Vancouver, which historically hasn't been a place where Houston has gotten a result, but maybe that could be a San Jose deal, and you can maybe bring back a surprise from that. At home against Montreal, which should be a bit of a winnable game, but we said that about Minnesota, we said that about Charlotte, and
Yeah.
those didn't necessarily translate into wins. So um, it's crazy that they're looking a little bit better on the road than they are at home. Um,
Yeah.
At Colorado, which I think some teams have been able to get a result, but it's toss up. At Minnesota, which again I think historically they haven't. I don't think they won it there at all. To be honest, at Seattle, which historically they've also struggled there, and that's because you're facing one of the best teams in the MLS always. Home against Kansas. We're into September now. Home against Kansas City. Home against New England, which
Winnable.
again, ideally winnable. Yeah. End of September or September 18th at LAFC. There will be a little bit of a break before their last two games, which is at Nashville in October, and and against the Galaxy here at home. So yeah, it's it's tough, right? It's kind of tough to see if we count the home games, right? And if you can get a couple, I mean, God, I feel like we're in this limbo every freaking year, right? If they do this and if they do this, then no. I mean,
yeah, but most of the
tough.
times, if you have to rely on other teams' results, most of the times that other teams are actually going to do what they have to do to make it to the playoffs. So as if you ask me right now, will they make it to the playoffs? I still stand by what I said in the beginning of the season. I was like, not to be no offense to Nancy's, but what is it? What is it? A negative Nancy? It's not
negative
that.
Nancy, yeah.
Yeah, it's not that. It's that I've covered the team long enough, and I used to go to the stadium every weekend for so many years, and only the past 2 years haven't I not gone to the stadium every game, because I'm now covering also the Dash and other things. But having covered the team for so long alongside your side as well, I think that you can kind of tell where the season is going from the beginning, and that's what I felt, and I stand by it, and like I said, hopefully they prove me wrong, but that's what I stand by. I don't think they're gonna make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, as the West stands right now, LAFC and Arsenal at the top with 45 and 41 points respectively. I think those two are probably already in.
Look at the difference.
They're ahead of the
45
bunch.
to 25, like
45, 41. And then you got Minnesota at number 3 with 34. So, I think that head start, those two are in. Minnesota, which I think the reason why it's such a big blow, right? It's because this would have been a direct win against the Western Conference rival, one that you need to kind of have jump out of that top 7, and you've made it more difficult. So Minnesota looks like they got their foot in as well. RSL, I think, are also in that mix at 33. FC Dallas has 32. Nashville has 31. And the LA Galaxy, I think by a hair, are just in 30. 8th place with also 30 points is Portland. 9th place is Seattle at 29th. And by the way, Portland and Seattle, they're usually, it's either one or the other that comes out of the Western Conference for the last 5 years or so. So I always get the feeling, those two are going to eventually get in. So who are going to be the two teams that get thrown out, right, of that mix? And again, you would think that being in front of those teams would be better than having to kind of chase behind them. Vancouver at 10th with 26. Houston, we mentioned, 11th at 25 points. Colorado with 24 points at 12. San Jose, 22 points in 13th. And then Kansas City, last place, 20 points in 14. But you're right, from last place Kansas City to the LA Galaxy at number 7, it's 10-point difference. The Dynamo are 5 points off, which again, 2-3 straight wins, and they're probably right back in it. But who's to say they're going to get those 2-3 straight wins and get back in the mix?
Yeah, exactly. And
even ties at this point, right? As long as you're as long as they'd be getting points, that would be a little bit more hopeful than.
Yeah, but then that's when you have to also kind of say, well, Seattle and Portland and LA and Nashville too, have to, go on a losing streak or tying so the points don't keep going up.
Right.
So it's just a lot that you have to really do mathematically to really say you're going to be in it with, the amount of games that are still left. Yeah, it's still possible if you don't do the math, but you also have to look about, what teams you're going against. So I think that's also important to take a look at. And FC Dallas and Austin are in, and Houston is not. So that's kind of like, okay, how are you gonna, talk about, talk that state trash to two teams that are right now looking like they're gonna be part of that postseason, and the Dynamo is still sitting very lonesome by itself, not in the postseason once again.
And you got your marquee signing in Herrera actually into the squad now, and it doesn't seem like it's providing that big boost that you would have liked, right? Um, Real quick, what can we do? What can we say about this team with Herrera? Because I do think he does give them a bit of a chance.
Yes.
How can they better utilize him? How can they start translating some of these things? What are the positives we've seen? I think obviously one, leadership and guidance. Can that be
Experience.
enough? Can that be enough to start getting some results?
I think that there's still, like we mentioned, certain key positions that are not being filled how they're supposed to make Hector really shine. Because if it was an individual kind of, sport, then I think we'll be doing fine. But it's a team kind of thing. And like I mentioned, I don't know if it's something mentally or it's emotional. Something of the players are just not going to the full potential, because there's just a lot of players that I know that could do way better, and they're not.
I mentioned the roster because it's, people are expecting him to be the Herrera of Atletico Madrid, which maybe he can reach that level. But let me tell you something: at Atletico Madrid, he has some of the best players, right?
Exactly.
He's kicking the ball to Antoine Griezmann. He's kicking the ball up. Luis Suarez was there, right? Behind him, he's got Jose Maria Jimenez, one of the best defenders. He's got John Oblak, arguably the best goalkeeper in the world. I mean, that's the kind of help that he had.
Exactly.
Atletico Madrid. Now that he's
and
that's
why I want to highlight that, because a lot of people are going to expect so much of him. I'm like, hold up. You cannot expect as much from Herrera if you don't have that team consistency and other players doing what they were paid for and hired to do. So for me, it's kind of like, yes, I think it's a breath of fresh air. I think that he has a leadership. He has like personality to him. He has enough grandeur to him that he can, have a positive effect on the team, but it can only go so far. He can only do so much.
Mention it. I mean, it's like Herrera with the Mexico national team. We know the slump they're in. Part of it is Herrera has the pass. It's the same thing he's doing here. When he's passing it to guys that just aren't effective in front of goal, I mean, that's at the end, the team suffers, right? To truly get the value that you want out of Ache, I think you do need a couple more key players. It's funny, right? I mean, like, it's the more they, you applaud them for spending money, but they still have to spend a little bit more money. I go back to, if you weren't going to use Sebastian Ferreira as an all-in-out starter, then that money would have been better suited, elsewhere, right? At, a couple of $1 million players, good $1 million players, right? That are actually worth that value, could have helped the team, right? Even if you just want to divide two players, right? Two solid players instead of one Ferreira, I think would have helped the attack. You've seen what you got out of a rookie like Toro Farson. Shows you that you could have found some value in the super draft to begin with, right? Domestically. And there was other ways, and you could have taken the hit earlier in the year of not having signed a big time player, but later on in the year, it would have paid off when you made the playoffs instead of sort of going this route. When I think at the time we'd mentioned, Ferreira didn't even suit the biggest need on the team, which was an attacking midfielder.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of holes. There's a lot of holes in there. And again, it's kind of going into the kind of reliving of what's happened, prior in other seasons. So it's just something like you're just hoping for the team to get to the point that, you're happy to see them not struggle. And, I think that's something that Houston wants, especially now that Houston has, is going to be one of the cities that are going to be part of the World Cup. So yeah, it's kind of, it is sad not to see the team hit its full potential. Okay.
Yeah, lots needs to happen for the Houston Dynamo to be what they proclaim they want to be, which is the city, a team worthy of the city of Houston. And we'll see if they make the additional moves to bolster the roster. Because that's the other thing. For as much as people have been talking, maybe criticizing Paulo Nagamura, and I've been one of them, right? On the striker.com, you can get all the analysis on there. part of that is there are things you can attribute to the coach, but part of it is also what are you sending him out to play with? What are you giving him as far as the tools to win? So we'll continue to cover the Houston Dynamo again to striker.com. That's where you can get all the coverage for the price of I believe we're at $5.99 a month. You get the Houston Dash, you get the other Texas teams. If you want MLS coverage, we got also coverage of Atlanta United now, LA Galaxy, LAFC. See what those teams are up to, and USL as well. Obviously, the Houston Dash, well covered, and now also Angel City and the San Diego Wave. So, Laura, parting thoughts?
No, I think that we've kind of covered everything, and like we've always say, if you guys have feedback for us, and again, thank you for listening, and we're always here to kind of listen and know your thoughts and see the fan perspective, and I know a lot of you guys have always kind of said, hey, keep it easy, keep it light, and some of you guys say, no, you're doing the correct thing, speaking the truth. So we appreciate both sides to take a listen and hear what you guys, not only think about the podcast, but also about the team itself. And like you mentioned, the striker is now the striker. So like I always say, please support local journalism, because without your support, we wouldn't be able to sit here and tell you the truth of what we feel about the Houston Dynamo and other teams.
We're bringing the heat, and a lot of times it makes you sweat. If you live in Houston, you know that for sure.
Yeah.
We'll catch you next time here on Inside the Hexagon. Until then, see you later.
Bye.